Most people are burning their budget on Google Ads because they trust the automation too much and don't know how to control it. Performance Max, or PMax, is the biggest change we've seen in Google Ads in years. It finds customers from search, shopping, display, YouTube, Discover, Gmail, all from one campaign. But here's the problem. If you don't know how to set it up and control it properly, you're just handing Google a blank check and hoping for the best. In this course, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to set up, segment, and optimize Performance Max campaigns in the right way. This is the exact playbook I use to scale over 100 direct-to-consumer brands with Google and YouTube ads. With that said, let's get right into the course. If you're running a Shopify store and are considering launching a Performance Max campaign, or you already have one running and you're not sure if it's actually working, this video is going to give you complete clarity on how Performance Max actually works in 2026. I'm Liam, founder of Vulcan, and over the past few years, my team and I have generated over $10 million with Performance Max campaigns across dozens of e-commerce accounts. We've seen what works, what doesn't, and more importantly, we've identified the exact conditions that need to be in place before Performance Max can become profitable. Here's what I've learned. Performance Max isn't the miracle campaign that Google's marketing materials suggest that it is, but it's also not the disaster that some advertisers claim it is. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, and your entire success with Performance Max depends on how well you understand how the machine actually works. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the first part of my complete Performance Max master guide for 2026. This is an A to Z blueprint that covers everything that you need to know. What Performance Max actually is, how it interacts with other campaigns, the prerequisites you must have in place before you start, and the strategic framework for structuring your campaigns correctly. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly whether you're ready to run Performance Max. And if you are, you'll have a clear roadmap for setting it up correctly for long-term profitable growth. You can download the free guide via the link in the description below, but for now, let's jump right in. So Performance Max is one of Google's many shifts towards more unified AI-driven advertising. It came to be in late 2021, and Google recommended it as a single campaign that we could use to basically run ads across the entire ecosystem rather than running individual campaigns for each placement. So for people, this was a blessing and a curse. For those that advertise solely on search and shopping, it was maybe a better vehicle for them to get introduced to new placements like video or display or discover. But for people like myself who prefer being in control, PMax represented a threat to how we operate and how we managed our media over in Google. The concern for us was that it was just a cash grab by Google to basically fill up low quality inventory across Google Display Network and also get more people spending through YouTube. And at the time, it felt like this was another play by Google to just create a fully autonomous platform where advertisers lost almost all control. Now, the reality here in 2026 is that Performance Max is achieving what it set out to do. It is causing people to spend more money on YouTube. YouTube AdSense for Google is going up year on year. And it's also been a way for new advertisers to access the platform. It's an easy intro into Google Ads. You just give Google your assets and it creates this Performance Max campaign across all networks. Now, I don't really like that whatsoever. I don't think it's a good place for new advertisers to start. But nonetheless, that is the reality that we're seeing at the moment. After generating over $10 million in Performance Max across dozens of e-commerce accounts, what I've learned is that it does work incredibly well, and only when it's set up correctly. You have to have a really clear understanding of where it sits and how it interacts in the context of your wider funnel. So that's both within Google Ads, but also your media mix. So Meta, TikTok, and organic. You have to have an understanding of how it operates within that. It should not be viewed as a starting point. It's not good for new advertisers or for new accounts. But if set up correctly, it can be a really powerful tool to grow your Shopify store. And that's exactly what I want to show you today in this guide. So the official definition of Performance Max is a campaign type that shows across all of Google's advertising. So search, in that it acts like dynamic search ads that you might be familiar with. Shopping, very similar to the smart shopping of old. Display, YouTube, Gmail, Discover, Maps, and this is all coming from one single campaign. Why Google created it? Well, I mentioned already that what I think it is Google basically forcing advertisers into all placements. So is it a cash grab by Google to increase their YouTube ad revenue and use up that low demand inventory across the display network? What Google says The reason is behind creating Performance Max was to find more conversions from existing data. It's designed to find more of what's already converting. It's not starting from scratch, it's building on your existing conversion data, and then it's using that data to find similar audiences across all of their ecosystem. So it's important to understand the key differences between traditional campaigns and Performance Max campaigns. So first of all, traditional campaigns are keyword focused. So particularly search campaigns, we pick the keywords that we want to target. Whereas Performance Max campaigns, our targeting is much more based on audiences or intent. So that's a very fundamental difference that you have to understand. Within that targeting, then obviously with our traditional campaigns, we had more manual targeting options. So we could target individual audiences, we could actually target them rather than observe them. We could target specific devices and we could target specific keywords. But the targeting is very much automated in Performance Max. We can give it recommendations, and these are called audience signals, and I'll talk about those a little more later in the video. But for the most part, it's automated. Traditional campaigns are single placement, so a traditional search campaign or a traditional shopping campaign, whereas Performance Max is, of course, as I mentioned, across all placements. And with traditional campaigns, we used to have manual bidding options possible. We still do, in fact. But with Performance Max, our only options are smart bidding. So that's things like maximize conversions, maximize conversion value, target ROAS bidding, etc. Whether we like it or not, Google is moving away from keyword focused targeting more to audience and intent targeting. Performance Max is one of a series of steps in which I believe the platform is moving to become much more audience focused. Now, how does Performance Max interact with your other campaigns? I hear a lot of scaremongering around this. Don't run Performance Max to the same keywords or the same type of products as your existing campaigns because they'll compete with each other and you'll end up paying more. But I want to break this down in simple terms so you understand fundamentally how PMax interacts within the context of your wider account. So it's all to do with ad rank. When a Performance Max campaign overlaps with existing campaigns, so existing products or existing search queries, it's going to interact in the same way that your existing campaigns would have previously with each other. And that's by measuring ad rank. And the campaign with the higher ad rank will serve. So sometimes this can be your Performance Max campaign, and other times it could be your existing manual campaigns like a display campaign or a standard shopping campaign. Quite often, this is dependent on the respective targets that you have for your existing standard campaigns versus Performance Max campaign. So if you have a really high target ROAS on your Performance Max campaign, it may not be able to bid quite as aggressively as, say, your standard shopping campaign if that has a much lower target ROAS. And as a result, your ad rank will be lower in your Performance Max campaign, and in that instance, your shopping campaign will serve. Now, it's not quite as straightforward as that. It's not quite as if your Performance Max is a target ROAS of 300 and your standard shopping is a target ROAS of 250, it will always win. One really important exception is to do with exact match keywords. So exact match keywords in your search campaigns will take the highest priority of any search queries or keywords in your entire account if they are identical to the search term. So an example of this, for the search term tennis racket, the identical exact keyword would be exact match tennis racket in your search campaign is prioritized over any broad or any phrase keyword or any Performance Max campaign. So this is very useful to know. We use this information quite a lot if there are particular high converting terms that we want to target manually via our search campaigns, because maybe we want to use our Performance Max campaigns to go out and find more long-tailed keywords to target that maybe we're not targeting as well in our search campaign. So if we want to regain control over certain queries, we will use exact match in our search campaign to ensure that our search campaign has priority over Performance Max. So it's something really important to know. As I said, a common misconception is that PMax competes with your other campaigns, causes competition between your campaigns, and that means you end up paying more for a click. That is incorrect. As I said, the reality is that the ad with the best ad rank will potentially be entered into the auction. There's obviously no guarantees, but it will not self-compete. It will not compete with other ads or other campaigns in your account to drive bids higher. So don't need to worry about that. The takeaway is you can and you should most certainly run other campaigns alongside your Performance Max campaigns, because PMax is only one piece of the puzzle. Next up is understanding some key terms. The first I'm going to touch on are asset groups. So asset groups are similar to ad groups within search campaigns. They contain all of your creative, your headlines, your images, your videos, your site links, all your other ad extensions. They are all within a single asset group within Performance Max. They also contain your audience signals, your products, so via your product listings. So basically everything lives inside of a single asset group. And this is just an image of basically a Performance Max campaign where you input everything within your asset group. So images, logos, videos, headlines, long headlines, descriptions, call to actions, etc. So this is what a typical Performance Max campaign may look like. You could have 3 different asset groups. Within each individual asset group, then you will have your assets, which are your ad copy, your images, your YouTube videos, your ad extensions, etc. You'll have your listing group, which are just your products, and then you'll have your specific signals, which are your search themes and your audience signals. One of the most important principles you have to understand when it comes to setting up Performance Max campaigns correctly is all about how you segment and structure your asset groups, because there is a tendency to basically fill up all the available assets in a single asset group. So you might take all of your top performing creatives from Meta and throw 20 of them into an asset group, and then you might take your top performing ad copy and do the same. But the issue is with this approach, you could have an ad delivery that doesn't really make much sense to potential customers, because you could have image assets from some products, you could have text assets from other products, and it basically is all just mumble jumble together in a random concoction of an ad. So an example of this would be if you were a footwear brand and you sold footwear across different product categories, so running shoes, hiking shoes, everyday shoes, and then if you sold across different genders, you might have men's shoes, women's shoes, kids shoes. So an example headline could be shop men's shoes. An example description could be explore our ladies footwear range today, get 10% off your first purchase. Our site links could be to kids footwear, running shoes, ladies dress shoes. The image that populates could be of a kid's sandal, and then we could have a similar ad then where instead of an image we have a video and it's a UGC style YouTube short of a man unboxing shoes. And you can see how basically none of these when paired together are going to make much sense to a prospective customer. So how do we actually avoid this? Well, the need is to focus on segmenting our asset groups in a more intelligent way. And if you followed my channel for a little bit, you'll have heard me speak about single theme ad groups or stags. And this is a recommendation I have for setting up ad groups within your search campaigns that are grouped across a more concise, coherent theme. And this is a similar structure that we would recommend when it comes to asset groups. So you should group by product categories, which is most common, group by brands if you sell multiple brands, if you're a reseller or a retailer, or group by product types. Don't group by audiences. So what I see sometimes is basically an asset group duplicated, but the audience is changed. So the audience signal is changed. People think they're hitting a different pocket. Doesn't work like that. That's no good. Random segmentation, don't do it randomly, obviously, because you can see the mess up here that could come. And then the other thing is overcomplicated splits. So don't create 100 asset groups because you want to target, one specific product. If you are this footwear brand, don't create 2 overcomplicated splits. It should be pretty intuitive to you. The key rule is that your asset groups should make sense for the images, videos, and ad copy you're creating. So I always look at everything I've put together in an asset group. So you'll actually see maybe here, you'll be able to look at your headlines, your descriptions, your images, your site links, your videos, pair them up and go, okay, if I paired this text with this image, would it make sense? Would it be coherent? The same with this video and this description, this video and this headline, this site link and this product. This is what you need to do to make sure that you are grouping around a coherent theme. Now, if you group according to product categories or product types, then you should be able to do this pretty well. So an example here, you might have a bestsellers Performance Max campaign. Your asset group 1 could be men's running shoes. Maybe that's a leading line for you. And then your products could be all of your men's running shoe category. Your images would be men running in these shoes, or you could have close-ups, product flat lays with the shoes. Your ad copy would be specific to men. It would be to do with maybe performance, comfort, durability, but it would be specific to men's running. And then your audience signals, I'll speak about those in a minute. They could be running enthusiasts, or it could be people who've previously bought men's running shoes from you before, your first party data. Then your second asset group, your women's training shoes. Maybe your products would be your women's training shoe category. Images would be more female focused, the same with your ad copy and the same with your audience signal as well. So that is so important to Performance Max. because you're operating inside in Google Ads. You're setting up a Performance Max campaign and you don't always see the end result. You don't always see an ad put together. Now you can look at previews inside in Performance Max and that is useful, but you have to remember that you are creating an ad here and you need to think about the combination of the different assets that you're putting together and whether or not the delivery of those would be good to a prospective customer and it would be engaging and it would be what they're looking for. Audience signals then. Basically, Google says that you can reach the right customers faster across Google with an audience signal. These are not targeting options and they're not hard boundaries. You're not telling Google, I want you to only focus on these people. What they are hints to Google about who might be interested in buying your products. It's a starting point for the algorithm. So instead of Google having no data to go off and having to do all this hard work itself, you're essentially telling Google, I think our customers fall into this bracket. They might be in market for running shoes. They might be people between 25 and 35. They might be people who have searched for marathon running shoes online. They might be browsing these types of websites. They are just recommendations. They're not restrictions. They're not targeting parameters. They're not guaranteed placements. So if you put your first party data in there, your customer list, that's not Google saying that it will go and target these people. Google will go beyond your signals to find conversions. Next up are your listing groups, and you just need to understand the terminology. A listing group is essentially your product group from your feed. It works very similarly to product groups within your shopping ads. Next up are search themes. These were introduced in 2024, and basically they are words or phrases that people use when searching for your products or your services. So this is just another way of giving Google a signal of relevant search queries. So once again, it's signals, not targeting. But what you can do is you can look at your search term reports of existing shopping campaigns or existing search campaigns, and you can add up to 50 of these converting search terms or search themes in Performance Max. And again, it gives Google basically more insight more quickly into who actually converts for your products. There's conflicting evidence as to whether or not audience signals and search themes actually improve performance. I've seen reports saying that they don't. Now, I have some campaigns that I use them in and it works really well. There's specific use cases, particularly if I want to focus more of a search element in Performance Max. I will then really focus on introducing search themes, as I find that when I have search themes, Performance Max tends to use more of its inventory on the search network. It becomes more search predominant. But like anything, if you do see a study, it's a study across a wild array of accounts. The outcome is a mean result of performance across a wide range of accounts. For your account, you could be someone who falls into a bracket where performance is much better with search themes or audience signals, or on the contrary, it could be the opposite. So what I always say is try it out, see what performance is like. You can maybe try an asset group without it, see what performance is like. But my recommendation is to mess around with it, particularly if you've got good first party data. I recommend adding it as an audience signal. Next up are the prerequisites checklist. Are you ready to run Performance Max? So before you start a Performance Max campaign, you must have these foundations in place. The first is an optimized product feed. This is critical. Are your product titles optimized? Are your descriptions complete and detailed and rich with keywords? Are all your relevant attributes correctly filled in Google Merchant Center? High quality images? Have you tested more lifestyle images to boost CTR? Your GTINs, brand info, is that accessible and accurate? Because essentially, if your feed is bad, your Performance Max campaign performance, at least from the shopping aspect, will be bad also. Now, you shouldn't be jumping to Performance Max if you haven't tried shopping campaigns. So you should be able to see if your shopping campaign performance is good or not. And if it's not, you should be looking at optimizing your product feed. I have a video about optimizing product feed. I'll link it in the description. But if you're looking to run any shopping placements, be it in standard shopping or Performance Max, you should be looking to optimize your feed. The second prerequisite is your minimum budget. I say $100 a day. It's always this kind of sliding scale of the more budget you have, the better. The more you're willing to invest in Performance Max, the greater the upside will be. So you need to be able to say that I can commit to at least $100 a day. Ideally more, but I wouldn't recommend Performance Max for less than that. Lower budgets will end up suffocating the account. Correct conversion tracking is critical as well. You should be using the Google Ads conversion tracking setup either via Google Tag Manager. You can use the Shopify API. Don't use a GA4 import. Find it misses about 30-40% of conversions, and that's data that could be fed back to Performance Max to improve it even further. Again, I'll link a video to setting up conversion tracking correctly for Shopify stores. That will be in the description below. You need to have existing conversion data. You should be getting at least 50 to 100 conversions per month currently. So if you have a new account or an account that's not getting a lot of conversions, if your performance is poor, for example, don't jump into Performance Max thinking that all of a sudden it will fix all of your problems, because if your search campaigns and your shopping campaigns are not performing well as standalone campaigns, they're not going to perform well inside in PMax as well. Then you should also have brand exclusions set up. You should not be letting Performance Max target your branded search queries. Either add negative keyword lists or, like we have here, a brand exclusion list to prevent this happening. The reason for that is you'll end up overpaying for these conversions within Performance Max is number one, but number two, and almost arguably more importantly, you will get a false sense of performance coming from Performance Max campaign. It will look better, the ROAS will be higher, your CPA will be lower than it actually is. Based on more like cold traffic or based on non-branded terms at least. So make sure you have brand exclusion set up. If you can't do those 5 things, then don't start Performance Max. You should instead focus on getting search and shopping profitable first as standalone campaigns, building that conversion volume, ideally 100 plus per month, optimizing your product feed and fixing your conversion tracking, because the greater performance you can get from those standalone campaigns in search and shopping, the more profit you'll be able to put together to one side to then use to scale Performance Max campaigns. So that would be my recommendation. Now, what I've walked through in the video is just the beginning. I've got a series of videos coming to break down my entire Performance Max master guide for 2026. It includes the strategic framework for structuring your campaigns, how you can build other campaigns around Performance Max to lift up overall account performance, and the best scaling strategies we've been using to take Google Ads accounts from 20 or 30K per month up to the 6-figure and beyond range. In the next video, I'm going to walk you through the entire campaign setup process, step by step, the exact settings, structures, and configurations we use to make sure PMax actually works for you instead of burning your budget. So let's dive right in. I've helped dozens of e-commerce brands scale using Performance Max, and this is the exact setup and framework we use to get stable and profitable results. With that said, let's get into the video. So I am inside in the new campaign menu inside in Google Ads, and I am first asked to select my campaign objective. Now, as an e-commerce brand, my objective is sales. We can go ahead and create a campaign without guidance if we prefer. This doesn't actually have an effect on your campaign. It just does dictate what type of campaigns you can set up. So look, for this video, I'm going to click on sales. Next up, we are using these conversion goals to improve sales, and the account default here is purchase. We know that that's set up correctly. That's obviously really important to set up before starting any campaign. And the next thing that we're going to be met with is to select a campaign type. And obviously in this video, we are setting up a Performance Max campaign. Next up, we are going to want to add products to this campaign. So we're going to advertise products from a Merchant Center account. And we're going to select our Merchant Center account, and that should be already linked to your Google Ads account. We are going to give this campaign a name. So let's call it Performance Max, and I'm going to create a best sellers campaign. Next up, we are asked about bidding. I generally like to start my campaigns on maximize conversion value bidding. This just helps get more data more quickly behind the campaign. You do have to be conscious that maximize conversion value as opposed to setting a target ROAS right away will likely lead to more aggressive bidding by the algorithm. And if you're setting up a Performance Max campaign, my recommendation is to ensure you have a mature account with a lot of conversion volume behind it. This will speed up the learning process for any new campaigns and will help you achieve better performance more quickly, essentially. I then recommend once you have 2, 3, 4 weeks of solid conversion data inside in this Performance Max campaign, when you're on maximize conversion value, you can then consider moving to target ROAS bidding. That's how I like to operate, and it works quite well for us. Now, I discussed this again, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to leave customer acquisition as the default unticked and go next. And we're moving on to campaign settings. So first of all, our location. So let's say we want to target the whole of the US. So we click on the US here. We have to be very careful though. We need to click on this drop down menu of location options, because by default, Google will select presence or interest. So people regularly in or who've shown interest in your included locations. This is recommended by Google as opposed to just presence. So not people who are interested, but people who are present in your location. The issue with presence or interest is that somebody like myself who's not currently based in the US would be deemed as having an interest in the US. I advertise in the US. I have a lot of interest in US news. I'm on a lot of my Google devices looking at information about the US. So technically speaking, I could be inside in this bracket as having an interest in the US. That said, if I was a US advertiser and I only shipped product to the US, I won't want to be targeting people who are outside the US but are just interested. It wouldn't make sense to me because I can't send product to them, or I don't want to. So select presence. It will just give you more efficiency from the get-go. Select our language. It's by default here English. We select no to this campaign doesn't have EU political ads. I'm based in the EU at the moment, and as such, I get this every time I set up a new campaign. I don't plan to use this account to run EU political ads. Next up then, ad schedule, keep all the time. Campaign URL options, you don't have to change this if you don't want to. Devices is next. Generally, you can keep this open, or you can exclude some devices. I know people have a bit of a preference at times of excluding tablets. They tend to be slightly poorer performing in terms of absolute volume. At times, for some brands, I see them perform just as efficiently as computers and mobiles. Sometimes it's less. Now, if you have existing campaigns, maybe you can review your data of tablets and TV screens. And if you see consistently underperformance there, well, then maybe you might say, look, we'll exclude tablets and TV screens. More settings then, brand exclusions is the next really important setting. So the issue I see most often for people with Performance Max campaigns is that they think it's doing really, really well. So they'll continue to push spend through it. And then all of a sudden it'll reach a point where when they're putting more spend through it, it basically plummets in performance. And generally speaking, what I see most often as the cause of this is that the Performance Max campaign is cannibalizing their branded traffic, either from branded search placements or by using shopping placements on branded terms also. That gives a false sense of performance, giving you the idea that performance is actually much more efficient than it actually is. So we have lots of room to scale, when in fact your non-branded performance could be quite low, but it could be being supplemented by really efficient branded performance. And as a result, then you get this really murky picture. So generally speaking, I like to exclude brand in two ways. I like to add negative keyword lists. So my branded negative keyword list to my Performance Max campaign. And the second then is via a brand exclusion. So we can add our brand list here, and we are not going to click on allow shopping ads on searches that mention excluded brands. We don't want to do that. Beyond that, you have demographic exclusions. This is new inside in Google Ads. It's not something I've tested quite extensively. Generally speaking, Performance Max is quite intelligent, and I think it's pretty easy with time for machine learning to understand which demographics are performing best and prioritize them in terms of delivery. So it's something that I will be testing, but more so in accounts that have a really clear picture in terms of a maybe gender split amongst customers that is in excess of maybe 90-10, or has a really clear age profile that's either really young or quite high. But if you're somewhere in the middle, I don't see the benefit of doing this. I would let machine learning do its thing. So next up is asset generation. This is where we let Google AI help us generate assets. Once again, it's not something that I like to use too often myself. I prefer having intentionally added assets that either we know are performing well or we're testing with a reason, as opposed to having Google's AI test a lot of assets. I don't think it is the approach, at least for now. So generally speaking, I will skip this. Then we're going to give our asset group a name. So I might just call this best sellers. So next up is our listing group, and listing group basically just means our products. Now, because I said this is a best sellers Performance Max campaign, I'll want to go in and edit this from all products to just the best selling products that I want to select. So we're going to click in here and say use a selection of products. And then we have an opportunity to select products by a series of different ways. Now, we can select it by item ID, which is going to just give us the ID of the product, and we can manually select each product. We can select products by type, by condition, by brand, by category, or we can select products by custom label. Now, if you use a feed management tool, or you can do this manually yourself inside in Google Merchant Center, you can label products perhaps as best sellers. And that means that you just have to go in and pick, so let's say custom label 0 is your best sellers. And then you can actually change which products come in and out on that. You can create rules to move products in and out, or you can do it manually. Let's just say for the sake of the video, I will pick 3 products from our list of products using item ID, and these will be, let's say, my 3 bestseller products that I want to target. Next up then are brand guidelines. So we're going to provide some logos along with our business name. So if we can provide a variety of logos, so horizontal, square, that just helps us with different placements. We can also give information on our color preference for our main color and our accent color along with our font. And next up, we are into asset creation itself. Inside in our assets, there are a number of things that we need to set up. The first is our final URL. This is where people will go after they click on our ad. Now, I've just said basically www.yourwebsite.com. Obviously, I'm getting the error message here. It doesn't match this Google ad account, which is fine. And next up is our first ad text requirement, which are headlines. Headlines are up to 30 characters in length. We can add up to 15 of them and a minimum of 5. Somewhere in the middle there between 8 and 10, 8 and 11 is generally where I max out, unless I have specific ones that I want to test more of. I personally find that maxing out across all of our assets generally leads to filling these gaps with poor quality text or image assets, for example. It also means that we don't get as quick feedback because Google has to test a wider variety of assets across different ad placements. So sometimes I actually think it's better to start lower with assets that you're more confident in, because you get quicker feedback into what's working and what's not, and then you can obviously change out what's not working. You also have long headlines, which are up to 90 characters in length. Again, you can have between 1 and 5 of these. Somewhere in the middle, once again, is good. Descriptions up to 90 characters. Again, just to be aware that long headlines and standard headlines won't interact with each other in an individual delivery, so you can repeat it yourself here, but just be conscious that your descriptions can be paired up with your headlines, so don't obviously repeat word for word what you're saying. Not that that would be good practice anyway. But in terms of ad text, a few principles: add keyword centric terms. So you should be creating an asset group around a common theme. So make sure that that common theme is basically given back in your ad text. So if it's a particular hero product, if it's women's shoes or men's shoes, and make sure you're talking about men's shoes and women's shoes in your headlines and your descriptions. Social proof, really strong offer, strong and specific call to actions really helps. And then benefit, outcome focused language. They're all principles I discuss in my Google Ad Copy 101 video. I'll link it here. Images are next. You should have a variety of images, so square, horizontal, landscape. It just allows you to create ads for different placements. Be conscious of text across images, because Google can sometimes flag it for a policy violation, but also some of your placements can be quite small, so text can be difficult to read if it's not very legible. So sometimes what might work on Facebook or Instagram in feed actually won't translate as much to a display ad that could have a slightly smaller placement and relative size compared with some of your Facebook creatives. UGC style images work really well. Native style images work fantastically well as well. But once again, you need to keep your images consistent with the asset group theme. I'll keep saying it. All of your assets need to be centralized around that common theme. I'll mention it in my last video about Performance Max campaign structure. But make sure that you are putting in images that are most relevant to your common asset group theme. The next assets are videos. Now, first of all, in order to use videos, they must be uploaded to YouTube. They can be unlisted or private, so they don't have to be public, but they have to be uploaded to YouTube in order to be used on Google Ads. So ideally, test a mixture of horizontal, which is quite often more kind of longer VSL style, or could be more hi-fi, and also have some YouTube short content, which is more similar quite often in nature to more native content on Facebook or Instagram. So use a combination of vertical and horizontal, use a combination of different video types, as I said, more hi-fi stuff, professional, VSL, and then traditional UGC like unboxing or testimonials work really well as well. So what you need to remember is that people are on YouTube for A, entertainment, and B, educational content. And quite often it's the latter that will do well, because people are looking for maybe reviews of your type of product, or they are just looking to be educated on what it is your product does. And this type of content can work really well. Next up are your ad extensions, site links. First of all, make sure that they are, once again, closely linked to your asset group theme. Call to action, you can either keep this automated or you can select something like Shop Now. You have other asset types: callouts, price, promotion, structured snippet. Once again, these are all gone through in far more depth in my ad copy video, but just always look to provide more value with your ad extensions. They're a great way of taking up more digital real estate. They're also a great way of creating more ad relevance by front loading some really important product terms that the user might be searching for. So don't just rush through them. Try to give as much value to the end user as possible. And next up is asset optimization. So there's a few different optimizations that Google will by default turn on. So the first are text optimization. So it will basically use information from your landing page to create its own headlines and things like that. So it operates quite like DSA. Quite often I will turn that off. And the second one is final URL expansion. Now, final URL expansion is quite an interesting one, and I'm going to speak about it in more depth in my next video. But basically, if I'm starting out with a new campaign, I will generally speaking turn it off. And once I have more consistent performance across my campaign, then I might look to turn it on. If I have it turned on, I will have very strict boundaries on what it is that I'm looking to target or important pages that I'm looking to exclude. But basically speaking, if you're very confident in all of the assets in your landing page that you have put together for this asset group, well, then you will probably not want to put a lot of these enhancements from Google on. So you've got text enhancements, you've got image enhancements, in terms of it can change the formatting and the layout of your image in order for you to be able to serve on different placements. So once again, it's something that I generally turn off. And video enhancement as well. Basically, it can turn your horizontal video to square video, or it can create a shorter video from a longer video. Once again, I've seen end products of these that are quite poor. I've seen ones that aren't bad, but I've also seen ones that really leave a little bit to be desired. And as such, it's generally something that I also turn off. And that brings us on to signals. So signals provide valuable information about the people you want to reach. They help guide who sees your ads on Google search, YouTube, and more. Now, the important thing that you need to know with signals, be it search terms or audience signals, is that they are just signals. They are not you telling Google to target someone in particular. They're you telling Google, I think this is important information for you to have, either in search themes about the type of queries that people type in looking for our products, or in terms of audience signal, these are important people either for our business, in terms of our customer list, or the psychodemographics of people that buy from us. So search themes essentially are where we provide words and phrases that describe what our customers are likely to search for. So if I am a running brand and let's say I sell running shoes, then some of my search themes, maybe I'll be able to see from other campaigns, so search and shopping campaigns, what people are actually searching and converting on. So it could be men's running shoes, it could be running shoes for marathon, it could be running shoes with cushioning, and it could be white, lightweight shoes for running. We can add up to 50 of these. Now, search themes allow us to tell Google the type of terms we either believe will or know to convert. So if it is something that we've seen in our search term reports, great, or if it's something that we believe is an important term. Personally speaking, I've had mixed results with search themes, and I know that the literature out there speaks a similar picture. Generally speaking, performance actually tends to be worse. Last year, I read a report that search themes did not necessarily have a net positive impact on performance, and the same to a lesser extent with audience signals. Now, that is a macro level report. If you're an individual business, you could fall in one end of the scale or the other. You could be a business where search themes or audience signals work really well for you, or you could be the opposite. But on average, they found that it didn't have a net, great positive effect. So I generally speaking will use it for new Performance Max campaigns more often than anything else. And that just helps guide the campaign a little bit more. The only other time I use it more consciously is when I'm trying to prioritize search placements in a Performance Max campaign, because when you have more search themes, I have just found from personal experience that you will see more traffic, more clicks, impressions, etc., run through the search element of that Performance Max campaign relative to a campaign that doesn't have search themes. So if I have a conscious reason to push more search in a Performance Max campaign, then I will look to add search themes to help me do that. But again, you do have to remember they are just a signal. It's not a direct targeting method. It's not you saying to Google only target people who are searching for these terms. They're not keywords. They are just a guide. With search themes, it's important to understand how they interact with search campaigns. So if you have existing campaigns on search in your account and you are creating a Performance Max campaign and you're running search themes, if you have exact match keywords and somebody has searched for that exact match keyword and you have an exact match keyword in your search campaign, that will get prioritized over Performance Max. So exact match keywords get prioritized over search themes in Performance Max. On the contrary, phrase and broad match inside your search campaigns will compete directly with your Performance Max kind of search portion. When I say compete, I don't mean that they'll self-compete or auto-compete in that they'll drive costs up. But essentially what happens is that Google will decide which of your placements, be it from search or from Performance Max, has a higher ad rank, and then that one will be put forward into the auction, or possibly to participate in the auction and potentially serve. I would say if you have particular search queries that are really important for your business or that convert really well, and you want to ensure that you're serving for as much of them as possible, or you want to get as much conversion value through them as possible, if you prioritize them in search using exact match, you have things like adjusting your bidding, you've adjusting your budget, and that has a direct impact on how well you serve on those particular keywords. If you're serving on those keywords more so in Performance Max and you increase your budget or you change your bids, those changes on bids or budgets have an effect at a campaign level and don't have the same direct effect on a keyword level. So you lose a small bit of control. So it's something to be aware of. If you want to maintain control over key high converting terms, then run them in exact match, or don't run search themes, or don't run Performance Max at all. There's 100 ways to skin a cat, but just to be aware. The difference with audience signal then versus search themes, I would say search themes are intent based buckets. So search themes are saying if someone is searching for X, Y, and Z, these are high intent terms. This is intent based. Whereas audience signals are saying, okay, Google, go look at people like audience A, B, and C based on identity, who they are. My recommendation to create a good audience signal is to include first party data. That's at its core the most important, because that's a really good way of you telling Google, these people are customers. They have bought my products before. Go look at them on a wider level and analyze the psychodemographics within this cohort and go find more people like those. Because if we can find more people that share the browsing tendencies, the demographics, the interests, the affinities with our existing customers, then there's a higher likelihood that they'll also find the value that our customers do from our brand and our products. So first party data is very useful. So you can also add different in-market segments, affinity segments. I use these less than most others. The only other audience that I tend to use a small bit is creating a custom segment of competitor URLs of, let's say, my nearest competition. Not necessarily aspirational competitors, but people who are very close to me in terms of auction insights and things like that. Because once again, I know that those people are people who have an interest in the types of products that I sell. So telling Google about those people is also beneficial, but that is using competitor URLs in custom segments. But even if you just export your customer list from Shopify, or you sync it up in Google Ads and you either add your all-time customer list, so you give it a lot of data, or you add maybe your most valuable customers based on purchase volume or purchase quantity, that's really useful information for Google, particularly once again for new Performance Max campaigns. That is when I find it most useful. If I have Performance Max campaigns that are working really well, I won't retrospectively add audience signals because targeting is pretty well dialed at that point. It is more so useful when you are starting out with a new campaign. So now that we've gone through our asset group, we've gone through our search themes, our audience signal, click on next, and we're going to be asked to set a daily budget. My recommendation really at a minimum is $100 a day. Anything less than that, I find it's difficult to get enough conversion volume. It's difficult to scale the campaign long term. And quite often you're actually better using that budget inside in manual campaigns, or even not even manual campaigns, but by using smart. Less than 100, you're probably better off staying with those standard campaigns for the time being. And obviously you can go higher than that, but just bearing in mind that Performance Max will give you kind of choppy performance initially. Quite often it obviously depends on a whole host of factors, including, the account maturity and the targets you're setting and everything like that. But I would say be prepared to set a budget that you're happy to stick with for at least a month. So don't go gung-ho and set it at $1,000 a day and then find that actually after a couple of days of poor choppy performance that you need to rein it back in, because that won't help you in the long term. So set a budget you're comfortable investing in. It will take time. Performance Max does take time, but if you set it up correctly as I've shown you, then it can be really, really useful for your business and help you find, new pockets of growth that you otherwise would have left untapped. Then we click publish and we are ready to go. That's how you set up a Performance Max campaign step by step in 2026. With that foundation in place, let's move on to segmentation. This is where most people get PMax completely wrong. They throw everything into one campaign and wonder why their results are suddenly terrible. Before we jump into the next video, I want to remind you that the complete Performance Max playbook is available for free to download via the link in the description below. All the campaign structures, the optimizations, all the checklists are inside for free. So go ahead and download it right away. And now let's dive into how you can segment and structure your Performance Max campaigns effectively. Most e-commerce brands advertising on Google Ads could be getting much better results with their Performance Max campaigns. And what's stopping them is their structure is a mess. Google's Performance Max is one of the most powerful campaign types right now, but only if it's set up the right way. If you throw everything into one campaign with random asset groups, Google won't know what to push together and you won't be able to scale profitably. So let me show you the exact Performance Max structure that I use for campaigns and asset groups to get the best results for our clients. And this approach has helped me generate over $50 million for dozens of e-commerce brands across multiple verticals. So let's get into it. So Performance Max campaign structure is one of the most important things to get right when it comes to building your initial campaigns. If you over segment your campaigns, you risk losing really important data that allows the machine, the algorithm, to learn on itself. This is so important for all of your campaigns across Google, be it search or shopping, but in particular, it's vital with Performance Max. And the reason for that is Performance Max relies so heavily on machine learning. So the better data, the greater data consolidation you can provide, then the better performance you'll see as a result. So if you over segment, you lose that data. But then if you consolidate incorrectly, which is essentially the opposite, you can end up serving ads that are just a mix of all different asset types, and it makes no sense, and performance is really poor as a result. So what I want to show you are some key fundamentals of campaign structure, along with some of the favorite campaign structures I'm using at the moment that I'm finding working really well inside in ad accounts. So let's start with asset group structure, and then I'll zoom the lens out to look at campaign structure as well. The way I treat asset groups is similar to the way I would treat ad groups inside in search campaigns. They should be centralized around a common theme. So all of your assets are linked to that common theme. Now, for you, that may be an individual product. It could be a hero product, it could be a product category, or it could be even a specific angle that you're pushing for perhaps your hero product as well. The importance of congruency around a centralized theme is so important because it creates, number one, ad deliveries that make sense. Because if you jumble everything up, if you've some assets from product category A and others from product category B, and then they're all just jumbled up into one ad delivery, for the end user, the prospective customer, for example, it wouldn't make any sense. So by centralizing around a common theme, you avoid that possibility. But the other thing then is it helps you boost ad relevancy for your core search queries, even within Performance Max. So unlike the approach that people will take sometimes in Meta, where you just want to maybe put a lot of your ads into one campaign and just see what performs best, that's not the approach to take here with Performance Max. So an example of how not to do it, right? So you have inside in Performance Max, you have things like text assets, there'll be headlines, descriptions, you'll have ad extensions like site links, and then you'll have creative assets like, say, images and video. Let's say, for example, we're a footwear company and we have product categories across men's, across women's, and across kids. So if we say, look, these are our top performing assets across the entirety of our Google Ads account, and let's just put them all into one asset group and see how it performs. Well, you could theoretically have an ad that has a headline saying shop men's shoes, a description saying explore our ladies footwear range and get 10% off your first purchase, a site link for kids footwear, for running shoes, for ladies dress shoes, and an associated image of a kid's sandal, or a video, if it was on YouTube, of like a YouTube short of a man unboxing his new running shoes. So you can see how none of this in combination would make much sense or be a very relevant experience for someone who was searching for either men's shoes or ladies shoes or men's running shoes or kids sandals. In terms of an ad delivery, it just would not work. It would not make sense. So how do we actually avoid this? So what we want to do is centralize our asset groups around a common theme. So either product categories, which is most common, brands, if you are, say, a reseller, if you have particular brands, or product types. And you can go more granular. As I said, you can go into individual products, particularly important if you're an e-commerce brand that has, maybe 20% of your products do 80% of revenue and you want to break them out that bit more. You can go at a product level. What I wouldn't do is to group our asset groups by audiences. So just duplicate an asset group and then test a different audience signal. That's not how we approach things. That doesn't really make sense. Our audience signal is just a guide for Google. It will go out beyond that signal anyway to find customers for us. So it's not like we're targeting someone directly with our audience signal. So we wouldn't have one audience signal targeting cohort A and a second audience signal targeting cohort B. It doesn't really work like that. So my recommendation would not be to split up asset groups by audiences. I certainly wouldn't split it up randomly, as I mentioned with that previous example across the men's, ladies, kids shoes. So don't go for an overcomplicated split. Ideally, we want to consolidate as much as possible. We should have a good reason to segment. So my natural place of being is consolidation, and then I have to justify to myself in an account as to why I'm segmenting. So my default position is to consolidate, and I have to have good justification, and obviously I always do, as to why I want to segment. So the approach I would say is mentally look at all of your assets and imagine a combination of those and think about what it is you're targeting, be it a product category or a product. Combine those assets mentally and be like, okay, if all of these assets, headlines and descriptions and images were bunched together, would it make sense for someone searching for the type of product that I'm selling in this asset group? So if we were looking at, say, maybe a bestsellers Performance Max campaign and we had two asset groups and one of them was for men's running shoes, let's say that's one of our lead product categories, well then the only products we would include in that asset group in our listing group would be our men's running shoe category. Our images would be of men's running shoes again, or close-ups, or it would be of models of men as opposed to females wearing the shoes. Our ad copy would be all to do with obviously men's running shoes and the performance element, the comfort, durability, etc. And maybe our signal would be running enthusiasts. Maybe we could drill down deeper into demographics. I'll talk about audience signals again, but we would have a very clear delineation that this is an asset group targeting men, specifically men's running shoes, and all of our assets and our listing groups make sense around that common theme. Then let's say we had an asset group targeting women's training shoes. So maybe this is slightly more gym focused as opposed to, let's say, runners. So once again, it would be our product category would be women's training shoes. Our images would be more female focused, maybe in gym settings. Our ad copy again is female focused, and our signal might be, slightly more geared towards a female audience or a gym going audience as well. But the last thing that we want to do is mix all these up into one asset group, because that is just not going to give us the optimum performance. So that's asset groups. Moving on next to campaign structure. So I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you're starting out as a new store or you're new to Google, maybe you're an established store but you haven't used Google before, my recommendation is to avoid Performance Max. Instead, run standard shopping campaigns. The reason I like standard shopping campaigns better than I like Performance Max for new businesses to Google Ads is that you can run manual bidding. I have a whole video on bid strategies. But if you're a new account, you don't have much conversion data, Performance Max performs much better with a lot of conversion data. So opt for standard shopping instead. With a standard shopping campaign, I would still look to split up the initial campaign with different ad groups split by product categories. It just makes it a bit easier for me to review search terms, review performance data by product category, because ultimately what we're trying to do here is create an environment that allows us to get a lot of data across all of our catalog to see which products are performing best and then which could be basically upgraded into a Performance Max campaign. So either products or product categories. So what we'll do in terms of optimizing this campaign, it's refining our negative keywords, it's product feed optimization, looking at things like click-through rate, what can be improved, do we need to make our product titles and our images more engaging to drive more qualified traffic through our listings. And we're keeping an eye out then for products that are leading the way in terms of clicks, click-through rate, but more importantly, conversion volume and performance, be it ROAS or CPA. So moving on then to creating our first Performance Max campaign. So with the first Performance Max campaign, this is going to contain the products or product categories that have performed well inside in that initial standard shopping campaign. So we still want to make sure that we're sticking to that asset group segmentation that we went through in depth at the start of the video. So we're breaking it out by product category, or once again by product itself at a more granular level. People might say, okay, well, why don't you just create a separate Performance Max campaign for each product category? Once again, my default position is to consolidate when I can, and there are reasons when I will not, when I will segment. But if I'm just starting out and I'm moving over and I want to devote maybe $100 or $200 a day to Performance Max, for me, based on my experience, I've found it much more beneficial to group these together inside in different asset groups within that single Performance Max campaign. It's always difficult to put an arbitrary number on when to maybe segment. I generally don't like to segment or split up a Performance Max campaign if I'm seeing less than 100 monthly conversions or 3 to 4 conversions per day, because my fear is that those split campaigns could, go closer to 50 conversions each per month. And at that point, you're not really able to use smart bidding to its full capabilities. You're really on the brink of having good performance, maybe with target ROAS bidding. And for me, it would make much more sense most often to consolidate to a single Performance Max campaign. Then for our other products, so it's not that we've forgotten about those and there's just a moment in time where we say, okay, we've winners and we've losers and the winners get upgraded and we forget about the losers. It doesn't work like that. We still keep a standard shopping campaign, and that is acting as a catch-all campaign. What we want to do is find more products with time that we can basically push more spend behind, be it in Performance Max or standard shopping itself. And with those products that are maybe not the first group of best-selling products that we found, again, what we're going to try and do is improve their performance by using core shopping fundamentals of feed optimization and good campaign structure. So one Performance Max campaign, 2 asset groups or 3 asset groups or 4 asset groups, depending on what makes sense to split by product category or by product or by brand, and then a standard shopping campaign right next door, acting as a catch-all for our other products across the catalog. So maybe that runs for another month and we find another product category that does well, or another product in itself, and we just create another asset group. So we graduate that over from the standard shopping campaign, we move it into Performance Max, and it gets its own asset group following those same segmentation procedures that I mentioned earlier. And we just have a series of asset groups now within this single Performance Max campaign. Now, breaking out Performance Max campaign. So as I said, my default position is to consolidate when I can, but there are definitely times when Performance Max segmentation is required and would be beneficial. 2 of the most obvious ones are location. So if you want to advertise in different locations, then my recommendation is to split those Performance Max campaigns into their own locations. So let's say you're advertising in the US and also Canada, it makes sense to have a Performance Max campaign for the US and another separate Performance Max campaign for Canada. If you have vastly different goals for your campaigns, you can also segment. I'll speak a little more about this, about margin bidding. I have changed my stance somewhat on this over the course of 2025. I'll get into it shortly. But other times you may consider segmentation, so budget control. So what you might see is a picture where 70 or 80% of your budget is going towards maybe a single hero product asset group inside in your campaign. So generally speaking, you don't have discretion over where your Performance Max budget actually goes. So you set the budget at a campaign level, but if you have several asset groups, Google will decide which asset groups get the predominant quantity of spend. So if you have an asset group that's not getting much spend, or on the contrary, you have an asset group that's basically hogging a lot of spend, it might make sense then to segment those out so that you can put a dedicated spend behind your, let's say, your top performing asset group, and then you can also put some dedicated spend behind the other asset groups, because it might just be a case that your top performer is just so much stronger than the others, but that mightn't be a reason not to run some budget behind those other asset groups as well. So Google will put money behind the asset group that it thinks will perform best in order for you to achieve the goals that you've set for it, be it a target ROAS of 300 or 400%. But if you have an asset group that's able to hit 500% target ROAS, but your others are still able to hit your KPI, well, Google will still prioritize the one that's going to perform best. But it still might make sense for you as an advertiser to put budget behind the other asset group. So in that instance, I would split them out so you have that bit of control. The same thing applies with inventory. So if you're coming up to a point where either you have a lot of inventory that needs to be cleared, or you need to pull back because you're running a bit low in some stock in some product categories, so what you can do is, once again, segment out your Performance Max campaigns to allow you to have that budget control to either push more budget through stock that you're holding a lot of, or pull back a little bit on stock that you're kind of worried you might be running low on. As I said, if you've an asset group not spending, kind of gone through this already, but you can prioritize spend through it by isolating it into its own campaign, and that can apply if you have several asset groups not spending as well. The next one is slightly controversial, and I see a lot of people advocating for this, and I probably would have been more so in this bracket at the start of the year. And that is where if you have a wide product catalog and you have a series of products that are higher margin and you have a series of products that are lower margin, well, then those products do need to be treated differently at a macro level for your business, but also in terms of your media as well. So one way of doing it is splitting your, let's say, high margin products into one campaign. And let's call it a Performance Max campaign, and setting a more aggressive target ROAS. So in this example, let's say 300%, and then moving your low margin products where, you know, your margin is maybe 25, 35% as opposed to 60, 70, 80. Let's then put those into their own campaign with a higher target ROAS, because we need to achieve that higher target ROAS in order to be profitable at that lower margin. Now, in theory, this makes a lot of sense. And generally speaking, it does have a positive impact, because you will push more high margin products at a lower TROAS and you will push more low margin products at a high TROAS. But the issue arises with a customer journey. So let's say you have a product at a margin of 75% and you say, okay, well, actually we can be nice and aggressive here. We can go for a 200% target ROAS. That makes sense. And we can really use this to push volume. Great. Somebody clicks on an ad of that product in your Performance Max campaign. They browse, they like the product, but they start browsing on the entirety of your website and they actually go and buy a different product. And let's say that product has a margin of 25 or 30%. If they convert, if they purchase that low margin product, your high margin product inside in Google Ads will actually get credited with a conversion and it will look like someone has come through and converted on a high margin product. But in fact, they haven't. And you've acquired this customer at a ROAS of, let's say, 200%, which is actually loss making for you as a business on your low margin products. Now, I've seen varying reports on how often this actually happens. It's obviously not easy to track, but reports have gone from 30 to 60% in terms of how many people actually buy the product that they click through. So something to be really conscious of. It still will have a positive effect, but it's not bulletproof. And as a result, it's not something that I'm doing as much. And I know I've seen some people talking about it. Some people are pro it, some people are against it. I'm leaning more so to the against point because it's not, as I said, bulletproof. POAS, so profit on ad spend bidding, is an alternative profit metrics, our company that help integrate that. So what you're actually doing there is you're optimizing for gross profit as opposed to optimizing for, say, ROAS. And that can be a better workaround if you are an advertiser with a really wide variance in margins across your product catalog. So not one that I recommend. I know I've spoken about it at length because it's quite topical, but my recommendations for segmentation are more so to do with budget control and more so to do with having multiple avenues to push budget through different asset groups. If, for example, you have asset groups that are not spending as much as you feel they could be. So in that instance, we might have, say, Performance Max split out by either location, as I said, the US versus Canada, or by goal, or if we wanted to split it out into its own budget or its own target ROAS. I don't feel as strongly on that, but let's say budget, for example. So let's say we have two top performing asset groups. Let's keep them in this Performance Max, and then these asset groups weren't performing as well in that original Performance Max. We segmented them out and we gave them its own budget, and we still had that standard shopping campaign to catch the remainder of our products and continuously look to improve performance horizontally across our catalog to find maybe new products to push into Performance Max. One other thing is using Performance Max for low performers or zombie products. Once again, I've seen this recommended by people. Low performers is zombie products. So zombie products are those that are not getting clicks or impressions really. Generally, they're just not getting any spend behind them. There can be a series of reasons for this. It can be that Google is prioritizing other products, or it can be that Google doesn't know enough about these products, and that's to do with your attributes inside Merchant Center and general feed optimization or a lack thereof. I don't like the idea of using Performance Max to test these products. I don't see Performance Max as a really good testing vehicle. I much prefer standard shopping. The reason for that is if you're not seeing much volume through them and you just lump them into Performance Max campaign, your conversion pixel doesn't know much about it. Your account in general doesn't know much about these products because it's not seeing, as I said, that conversion volume through it. And what you're going to see is really erratic performance. And okay, you could get lucky and it could work, but at least in my experience, a higher likelihood of that not happening. So you need to understand the root cause of the reason behind its low performance or the fact that it's getting no spend. And for me, a better place to do that is more controlled environment like standard shopping, where you can have manual bidding, you can gradually increase the bids, or you can run it on max clicks as well. So I would, instead of just pumping everything into Performance Max as a bit of a hit and hope, I'd focus on the fundamentals of shopping. Ask yourself what can be improved with these product listings. So first of all, is price competitive? You can use the price competitive service inside in Google Merchant Center. There's loads of reports there to tell you maybe what the benchmark price is, whether you're over that, under, or at benchmark. Is your traffic relevant? So again, I find it slightly easier if I have these products in their own ad group in a shopping campaign. I can review search terms and I can go, okay, well, that traffic isn't really relevant. No wonder people are not clicking through and the click-through rate's really low and the click volume's really low. There is a fundamental issue with search terms. So I need to take a step back and look at my feed. Is my product title optimized for the quality of traffic that I'm looking for the type of traffic I'm looking for, and things like that? Do I have enough attributes provided to Google about these products, like my GTIN, for Google to understand exactly what it is I'm selling? So I've said that if traffic's relevant, review search terms, review product title, review, all your other attributes of Merchant Center. So say the click-through rate is low, say your traffic is actually qualified, but click-through rate is low, you have an offer issue there, be it in terms of price or be it in terms of your product title and your image. It's just not enticing enough. Reviews, make sure they're coming through. They can help improve your click-through rate as well. And then is click volume low? So you can review your bids versus benchmark CPC. So if you actually go into your listing group inside in standard shopping, you can see benchmark CPC, which is basically what people are paying for clicks inside in the auction that this product is involved in. And if you find that you're way below benchmark, well, that could be your issue, is that you're not competing at a high enough level in the auction. So maybe you're not getting the highest placements in terms of the shopping listing. So that could be another recommendation. But these are the questions I would be looking to answer rather than just pumping everything into Performance Max and hoping that it works. To wrap up some of the core principles of Performance Max segmentation: centralize your asset groups around a common theme, and that helps with ad delivery and it helps with ad relevance. We know that Google loves ad relevance and it rewards you with cheaper CPCs. Cheaper CPCs helps you with the economics of paid media, helps you acquire customers at a lower cost, and helps you just be generally more profitable. Consolidate at the campaign level in Performance Max when possible. As I said numerous times in this video, that is my default stance, and I segment only if I have a good reason to. And if I do segment, I really aim for each of my segmented Performance Max campaigns to be trending at least, or be quite close to having 100+ conversions per month, ideally far in excess of that. But that is where I really have a baseline in terms of where I see the best performance. And my last principle is that I do not believe that Performance Max should be used as a testing ground for new products or new assets. So you know the structural segmentation now, and that brings us on really nicely to the next part of the course, which is all about Performance Max optimizations. Your campaigns are set up and operating now, but you need to know how to optimize them in order to see long-term, predictable and profitable growth. This is where the real work happens. So let's jump in. Your Performance Max campaign is live, but results are flat. If it sounds familiar, you're not alone, because most advertisers never optimize it the right way. Performance Max doesn't work like other Google Ads campaigns. You can't just set it live and hope Google figures it out. So in this video, I'll show you how to optimize your Performance Max campaigns the right way, based on real accounts that I manage every single day that are spending tens of thousands per month just with Performance Max campaigns alone. So with that said, let's get into the video. So the first thing I want to discuss are budgets and bidding. And the reason I want to touch on this first is it's the first opportunity for you to make good or bad decisions when it comes to optimizing your Performance Max campaign. So in terms of budgets, initial budgets, in my opinion, should be at least $100 per day. And it should also be at least 3 times your average CPA. So for example, if your average CPA in your account is $60, well then $100 per day won't cover that 3 times your CPA. And in that instance, I would recommend looking at $180 or even $200 a day as a starting budget. And the reason for this is that you need to get enough conversion volume through the account. Ideally, 3 conversions a day or 100 conversions on approximately per month. That is where I want my Performance Max campaigns to be operating at. So generally speaking, right, if performance is choppy at the start, which it often is, particularly for new Performance Max campaigns, and your plan is to respond to this by dropping budget below either that $100 minimum or that 3 times your CPA minimum, then I don't think opting for Performance Max in the first place is necessarily the best choice for your business, because you're going to need to be patient with Performance Max in particular to allow for data aggregation, greater conversion volume, and just better performance overall. If you're not in a position to maybe go through that initial choppiness, then I would actually opt for standard campaigns, most notably for e-commerce brands, standard shopping, and then maybe a little bit of standard search as well. Wild budget swings, wild bid strategy swings will really hurt the algorithm. I would say, generally speaking, you can increase budget more aggressively than you should cut budget. So if you see really good performance, you can actually be quite positive in how you increase budget. You can increase budget 20, 30, 40% at times, and performance can hold really strong. I've seen cases where people double budget and performance is really strong. It depends massively on what it is you're targeting, general performance, your actual budget level in that moment in time as well. But for the most part, having budget cuts of 30 or 40% will actually put the frighteners up the algorithm, for want of a better phrase. And what you can find sometimes is that it gets very defensive and it does not spend as much, and performance then drops as a result. So if you are planning on cutting budget at any stage, I generally recommend trying to keep it to increments of 10% or less. Let that settle for maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then if you still want to reduce budget, cut it again. But if you go and cut 40, 50% of budget in one go, expect to see a real change in performance, and quite often not for the better when it comes to performance max campaigns. The same thing applies to bid strategies. So I said in a previous video that I recommend moving from maximize conversion value for new campaigns, then after 3-4 weeks into target ROAS bidding once you see more consistent conversion volume and more stability in your performance. So for some advertisers, that might be 2-3 weeks. Others, that might be 6 to 8 weeks. So it's not a fixed date where you go, okay, after 4 weeks, I'm definitely changing over. So you need to basically wait to see some more, I would say, stability in conversion volume on a daily and a weekly basis. But when you do transition to, say, target ROAS bidding, my recommendation is to set that target ROAS either at or slightly below where it is your actual ROAS has been. So let's say you set up a campaign and it was running for 30 days and the actual ROAS of that campaign was 320%, for example. In that instance, depending on my goals, but most often if you're creating a performance max campaign and it's only 30 days old, your goal is going to be to gradually increase the budget of that campaign. And if that goal is the case, well, then you don't want to stifle that campaign by setting a target ROAS that's too high. So I would say set your target ROAS either at, which would be 320%, or even a little bit lower, maybe 300%, just to give the algorithm that more, bit more flexibility to go out and find more conversions and not feel limited in terms of its capability to go out and target cold traffic. So when it comes to looking at performance max campaign and its daily spend, if you find it's not spending its daily budget and you don't have any wider diagnostic issues in the account, so you don't have an issue in Google Merchant Center that's preventing your campaigns from serving, or you haven't got an asset group that's got a policy violation preventing it from serving, then chances are your target ROAS is set too high. So the algorithm doesn't feel confident enough in its ability to go out and spend your budget and actually give you that return that you're looking for. So it restricts itself to warmer traffic, which will, basically mean that the total budget will be lower unless you have a massive warm traffic pool. But generally speaking, it will restrict budget. It will do so because it feels like it can target that warm traffic and achieve that target ROAS goal. But actually, when it needs to go beyond that and target cold traffic, which it will do with that additional budget, it doesn't have the confidence that it can go out and achieve that target ROAS you've set. So sometimes the best approach there is to lower your target ROAS to allow the campaign to begin spending once again, and actually to learn and get more efficient then with time. So you're kind of going backwards to go forwards. Okay, so this is an account that I'm auditing at the moment, and they have actually recently set up a performance max campaign, and it's only running since the 3rd. Today is the 17th, so it's only got 2 weeks of data behind it. Now, one of the first places that you can look when it comes to analyzing performance of performance max campaigns is into insights and reports. And the first place I'm going to go is search terms. And the reason I'm looking at search terms globally, my question is this performance max targeting branded traffic or non-branded traffic? And based on my understanding of conversion rates in this account for non-branded traffic, I was quite concerned at actually the level of conversion rate in the performance max campaign, which was quite high relative to other non-branded campaigns. So that made me suspect that it was full of branded traffic. And now obviously I have to hide these terms for privacy's sake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a search term filter that does not contain the brand name. So when you actually look at this, I can go down to the bottom here and I can see that in our campaign, we have 350 conversions across the last 2 weeks, cost per conversion of $16. But actually in this filtered search term, which excludes branded queries, we actually only have 49.6 conversions, almost 2.5 times the cost per conversion as you'd expect in non-branded traffic. Conversion rates obviously lower as well, and cost, we're only spending about 40% of the campaign total budget on these terms. So you can see right away that Performance Max is targeting branded traffic. It's cannibalizing branded campaigns here and basically not doing what it needs to do. So my recommendation here would be, as I mentioned in my setup videos, excluding branded traffic via a brand exclusion list and also via negative keyword lists. And that helps prevent you serving for branded traffic in Performance Max. And the reason you don't want to do that is, firstly, you'll overpay for this traffic. And secondly, it can give you a false sense of heightened performance of your Performance Max campaign, which unfortunately this brand owner has, until I obviously relay some of this information back to them. So you can also see some of this information here under Insights, and you get categories of your search terms. So they're kind of grouped together in categories as opposed to individual search term data that you have in the search term report. Now, not only is it good to establish if you're serving branded traffic, okay, but let's say you fix that or you set up your Performance Max campaign in such a way that it was never going to be a concern of yours about targeting branded traffic because you followed the right steps that I showed in previous videos. What can you use the search term reports for? Well, first of all, it's very good for you to get an understanding of what Performance Max is going out and targeting. Secondly, you can also use it for keyword mining. What I mean by that is if you see search terms that are performing quite well in your Performance Max campaign, maybe they're slightly longer tailed keywords, or maybe they're keywords you just generally hadn't thought about before. You can go and target those directly using search campaigns, or you can add them to your product listings and your product titles if you feel like they're important terms that you want to serve your shopping ads more predominantly for. So not only would I use search term reports, search term insights to get a sense of branded traffic, I'd also use it as an opportunity to find new keywords or new really important search terms that you want to be serving for. So the other really valuable insight you get in this menu is the audience insight. So you can understand your top audience segments, their performance, and how unique they are for you. So first of all, you will get a share of conversions. So what this means is essentially how many of your conversions came within these segments. Now, the thing is with share of conversions, I don't think it's as valuable as the index, which I'll discuss in a moment, particularly for segments that are quite broad. So fashionistas is quite a broad segment. It's basically anyone who's looking at any fashion website, any apparel website, and it's affinity audience as well, which is not as tight as like an in-market audience. Share of conversions is most useful when you see a really specific segment rather than a really general segment, because a really general segment will have just greater volume of people and you'd expect a greater share of conversions just by pure mathematics. But if you've got a really niche segment that's contributing a large share of your conversions, that's something you should really pay attention to. The same thing applies with the index. So the index basically means how much more likely is someone in this segment to convert in this campaign compared with the general population. So an index of 1 would be that they are equally likely as the general population. So you wouldn't say that this is a particularly strong segment for you. It's the same as general population. So if you have really high share of conversions in a segment, but like this one here, the index is pretty low, I wouldn't really read too much into it. Now, also in the context of this campaign is 2 weeks live, so this data is quite immature as of yet, so I wouldn't really be drawing too much information from it. But let's say with time, we found quite a specific audience segment and it had a really high index, let's say 4 or 5 times. What that means is that that particular segment is 4 or 5 times more likely to convert than general audience segments or general population. So you can use it to help the algorithm for a new campaign. But one thing I have done quite often recently, and this has performed really well, is, and this isn't a direct example of one I've used, but it's very, very similar. So let's say you sell watches and you see a segment that is a bit of a surprise to you and it's an in-market segment for golf equipment. Well, then what we actually did was create an asset group that was specifically for this persona. So it wasn't just the audience we were targeting, and we kept everything else the same, because I have mentioned before about asset groups that you need to have a common theme and you shouldn't just duplicate an asset group and change the audience. That doesn't work, or at least in my experience. But what we did was we then had dedicated ad creative, which showed off our watches, but in a golf setting, and it had like copy, it was like luxury style on the green, and our messaging then was tailored to a niche audience that had been proven through a lot of data in other campaigns. And it actually worked really well. Now, it wasn't as wide a pocket of an audience as more of our general audiences, but it was another avenue that we could dig deeper. And we actually took those insights into Meta, then it worked really well also. So audience insights, very insightful. And it's also something I would look at with time. Again, this campaign is 2 weeks old. I wouldn't read into it too much. But if you have a campaign that's 2 or 3 months old, you've got lots of conversion data behind it, and you see something that's quite niche with a high index, I would pay attention to it and see what you can do on a larger business scale. So I'd also look at things like when and where ads showed. So mobile, computer, tablets, TV screens. just to make sure we've got no outliers there. If mobile performance is low, I would be really looking into our landing pages. Are they mobile optimized? Can look at when ads showed, where ads showed, so locations as well. So if we find a location performing really poorly, well, then maybe we'll choose to exclude that location. But this would be something we do only when we were really confident. Again, machine learning will take care of a lot of this stuff. It's all about just giving it really good inputs. And I find that it does over time do really well to predominantly serve in your better placements. But you need to be getting a wide understanding of Performance Max and not just looking at your 4 KPIs on the overview page. You actually need to be understanding what's happening across all different levels of the campaign. So next up is channel performance or channel reporting. It's still in beta, but it works by Google providing us with more data on the different channels and how they are performing within our campaign. So previously we would have used a script to extract this information into a Google Sheets. Mike Rhodes, who would be pretty well known in the space, had a fantastic script that a lot of accounts would use, and that would give us this information. Now, what you'll see here, it takes a small bit of understanding, and it looks a little confusing at the start, but you can see your impressions, your interactions. So for a lot of ads, that's going to be clicks. And then for some of your video ads and stuff, that'll be engagements. And then your results here, in this case, is purchase. So we see discover, display, Gmail, maps, search. And what's interesting in search is search actually encompasses shopping as well as search itself. So this is impressions from search ads using product data, which is shopping. And this is impressions from search ads not using product data, which is not shopping. So it's search. And then YouTube then also. So we can see the different levels of spend through each, and we can see what level of clicks they're driving. And then also we can see which campaign types are driving performance for us. So you can see this is predominantly search and shopping. And again, they are the only two things that are actually driving direct results in this campaign. You can also go down here where you can get a little bit more information. I've segmented this according to ads using product data and ads not using product data, because let's say I want to go a little deeper into this search segment here. Well, I can see, okay, we have about 3,000 clicks thereabouts. Half of them are coming through ads using product data, 1,600, and ads not using product data, so our search ads are 1,300. We have 184 conversions through shopping, 160 through search, and we actually have a higher purchase conversion volume through search for a lower amount of conversion, so our average order value here is higher. Then I've also added our conversion value by cost, which is ROAS, so you can see our shopping ads have a lower ROAS there as expected, with the higher average order value through search, and then our cost per conversion is almost identical. So you can get more of an insight into how each individual channel is performing at the campaign level. It's quite useful. I'm still kind of skeptical on some of the data that comes through discover and display and things like that, but it is very useful. It is quite good for newer advertisers who maybe wouldn't be as familiar with using scripts. But again, it's another source of information about performance across different levels of your campaign. The next thing I want to talk about are keywords, and specifically negative keywords. So Google has very nicely added the option of us adding negative keywords to our Performance Max campaigns. So previously we would have either added them at an account level, in which it would have affected all of our campaigns, including Performance Max, or we would have had to reach out to a Google rep directly to actually add a negative keyword list. But now this makes it much easier. So when we're reviewing our search terms like we would in a search campaign or a shopping campaign, we can either add negative keyword list, which is where I'd add a branded list here. Maybe we would add a universal list as well of terms we never want to serve for. And then we can also be adding negative keywords as we go. So particularly for a new campaign, this is quite useful. If you are seeing a lot of garbage traffic, then you might want to add some negative keywords to prevent you serving from that and wasting ad spend on it. Just be careful not to add too many negative keywords. Google has access to contextual signals that we don't have. And sometimes we might look at terms that don't make a whole lot of sense for us, but actually end up converting. So it is a fine line of looking for terms that you feel will never convert, are not relevant to your business, and you never want to spend money on them. And then when you find, okay, I'm somewhere in the middle, I'm not really confident that this is an important term, but it could be yet, then in that instance, I would say maybe just let it ride out another 2 or 3 weeks of data and get some more volume behind it before making a decision. So how do you look for terms to exclude? Well, first of all, as I said, we have branded traffic we obviously want to exclude, but then obviously what you want to do is look for relevant terms or irrelevant terms. So for example, if you sell premium coffee machines and let's say they're $700, $800, $900, and someone has a search query for a cheap drip coffee maker, well then they're not really in the market for what it is you sell, and you probably don't want to be serving ads for them. Now, maybe they will change their mind, but for the majority of cases, they're looking for a cheap item and your expensive coffee maker is not what they're after. So you might want to exclude those using negative keywords. You might also, with time, look to sort your search terms by overall cost to maybe set a filter to look for conversions less than 1 and try to look for really high spending terms that aren't converting. Again, just be careful with these. You'd be surprised sometimes performance is higher with time on some of these terms than you'd expect. But if you have a really mature account and you find yourself consistently spending money and you're not seeing any performance come through a term, then there could be justification to exclude that also. So next up is asset group performance. Okay, so I start by looking at what is campaign performance like, what's asset group performance like, what's individual assets like, and what are my product performance looking like as well. So my campaign performance, obviously I looked at it there, it's quite high level. It's obviously starting with campaign performance. You can go to your overview and just look at some key metrics. So I can see my cost per conversion, my general cost here. I can obviously change these around to look at things like my ROAS, etc. But then if I want to go a little deeper, I'll go into asset groups. So within asset groups, then I can check, okay, what's the status of my asset group? And this asset group here is actually limited, obviously, because of clickbait. So we need to figure out why that is and actually what assets are triggering that. We can look at CTRs, average cost per click, and all our performance metrics here as well. So once again, in the context of this account, I wouldn't be looking too much into it too early because we're only 2 weeks in. But in the context of a more mature campaign, you can look at an asset group that's not getting as much spend as it should be. So maybe even here you can see this asset group here is getting a predominant amount of spend relative to the second asset group. So if this was continuing to happen and we weren't feeling like we were getting enough spend through that second asset group, well, then maybe there would be justification for segmenting it out to ensure it got a set amount of daily spend. So asset group is the first level down from campaign where you can actually monitor performance. Next up, we go to assets, and under assets, we can go to performance, and we can look at all of our different assets here. We can look at headlines, business names, images, YouTube videos, CTAs, and we can sort them by performance across all of our KPIs. So total volume of conversions, conversion volume, what is the CTR associated with these assets, what's performance like across ROAS and things like that. So generally speaking, what's more valuable here is to compare like with like, so there's no point looking at a business name and a description and comparing performance against the two. What you want to be looking at is, say, asset type is headline here, and looking at your top performing headlines, and then also looking at your poorest performing headlines, and try to identify themes across each as to why they are performing really well and why they're not. Now, I would look at this here and say, okay, that's a really high click-through rate. It's actually double this one here. So this click-through rate here is 19.7%, whereas this one here is actually 8.95%. Now, if this was in a properly set up Performance Max campaign, I would be really interested in understanding why that is. Now, I am obviously hiding these assets behind a gray screen, so you can't see them for client privacy, but that second headline is actually a branded headline. And I know because of the branded traffic here that it's probably serving on those branded ads, which already have a really high CTR. So I wouldn't be reading into it too much. But if this was a well set up Performance Max campaign, I'd be looking at that headline in particular and trying to understand why it is it has such a high CTR. The same would apply for descriptions, for images, for videos. So you're looking for your top performers, your bottom performers, and then understanding why each are in those positions so that you can double down on your good performers or else change your poor performance. So next up, I go to products, because I want to have a look at performance by product. I know that this Performance Max campaign has such a high volume of traffic through shopping. Then I want to dig a little deeper and look at the individual product performance. So I can go here and look at performance across costs, conversion value, ROAS, things like that. What's our CTR? Can we look to improve? So I would say the CTR here of 0.5% is quite low, and you can even see it across other ones. I ideally want this to be closer to 1%. So when I see a low CTR like that, my thoughts are either qualifying our traffic better, using feed optimization, or making sure our search terms are squeaky clean. So there are some of the optimizations that we can do. Next thing then is down to content. I want to ensure that we have good content exclusions set up. So this is where we can do it, or we can do it at an account level. But basically, Google will serve your display ads across all of its websites, but it will also serve it across lots of apps as well, mobile apps. The issue with mobile apps is that people often mistakenly click on your display ad, even though they're not interested because they're trying to shut down your ad. The quality of mobile app placements is really poor. We found that across the board. So we have a blanket rule of excluding those placements. There are 140 of them, and you actually need to manually exclude that. We generally do that at an account level. It's not being done here at either campaign or account level, and that would be something that can help make sure that your display traffic is going to higher quality inventory. So if display is performing poorly, not only can you look at individual asset performance, but I would also recommend monitoring your content placements and ensuring that you have your exclusion set up for that low quality traffic. And the last thing I would look at is final URL expansion. So basically this setting controls Google's permission to browse your website. So when it's on, basically Google can ignore the final URL that you set in the asset group level, and it will send users to any page on your website that matches their search query or the most relevant page. It can also, with this setting of text customization, it can rewrite your headlines. So it acts as like a dynamic search ad essentially. And what I would say with final URL expansion is generally I start with it off in my Performance Max campaigns before turning it on. If you turn it on, my recommendation is to exclude some URLs. So your privacy policy or your returns policy, they're not pages you really want to be sending people or you want Google to be creating headlines from. You can use page feeds to actually give Google a set of pages that you want to run it to, rather than having the opposite apply where you tell Google run it to all pages except for A, B, and C. You can actually say Google only run it to these 20 pages. So that's another thing you can do. If final URL expansion is on, then you can expect more cannibalization from your other search campaigns inside your ad account. So if you find the performance across search as a whole is decreasing, then maybe it would make sense in that instance to turn off final URL expansion, take the reins back yourself in your manual or standard search campaigns, and actually control more of search via that. So that would be one thing to look at. If search performance is down, obviously you're looking at things like your search term report, making sure once again your traffic is qualified. The other thing I would recommend doing, particularly if you do have final URL expansion on, is to go back out to your general overview page, and then under insights and reports, you'll actually be offered landing pages here, and you can look at landing page performance. Then I would filter landing pages by campaign and then select your Performance Max campaigns, and you can actually see the performance of your individual landing pages here. So this is important if you find URL expansion on, because I might say, okay, well, our ROAS here, for example, is 1.54. And that's much lower than the average we're seeing at the campaign level of 3. So maybe it warrants turning that off or excluding that from final URL expansion. So that would be the next thing I would do if search traffic quality was poor. So there's lots of different things you can do. There's so many different places you can go to actually get more of an insight into performance in PMax and actually understand where and why it isn't working as well as you'd like. So an absolute hatful of optimizations, and I've gone through them there at length. So my recommendation is start high level and look at campaign performance, and then drill down into asset group performance, asset performance, product performance, landing pages, everything like that. When you're looking at your channel reporting then, and you see an individual channel lagging or dragging down your overall performance in Performance Max, make sure, first of all, you look at it in the context of the campaign. So sometimes for YouTube and Discover in Performance Max, that might be targeting kind of slightly higher funnel activity than your search or shopping. So as a result, you mightn't see as high direct ROAS or performance. So don't necessarily cut it. But if you do see prolonged poor performance, or you just feel like a particular channel is lagging behind, there's a few things you can do. So for search campaigns, look at final URL expansion, review your search term reports, make sure your asset groups are congruent around that common theme, check out your landing page performance. For shopping, all about feed optimization, making sure that your top performing products are getting adequate budget, that they're not being stifled in massive asset groups. YouTube videos, so you can obviously look at your individual asset performance there, what videos are working best, what videos are driving the best engagement, what styles, is it horizontal or vertical, what placements. Make sure you're excluding low quality inventory as well. That applies to display. Same with display and discovery. If you have images that aren't performing well, make sure you take them out of the rotation. And if you do that and you have a system whereby you're monitoring performance top to bottom, and then you have action items that you can take to actually improve performance across each individual channel, well, you've got much better guide and understanding of how you can improve Performance Max performance, because it's not the black box that it once was. Far from it. There's so much we can do, and we actually do on a daily basis to improve performance, and it makes a significant difference. So don't just leave it sit there and hope that one day it'll magically work. You need to have patience with it, yes, but you can't just leave it there unattended and expect machine learning to just give you everything you need and it'll be rosy and you'll all of a sudden be spending 6 figures a month on it. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. If it did, well, then nobody would be running Google Ads accounts. So we've gone through Performance Max optimizations, and now we're getting onto a really interesting topic, which is all about Performance Max versus shopping ads? I get this question all of the time. Which one should I be running? And the answer isn't as simple as most people think. I'm going to break down the good and bad of each campaign, when to use one over the other, and how to make the right decision for your business. So let's jump in. Performance Max or standard shopping campaigns. Which is the best option for your e-commerce store in 2026? I've been asked this question 3 times this week alone, so I've decided to put together this video to finally answer it. And I spent over $5 million on both campaign types during 2025, so I know what works and I know what doesn't at scale. I'm going to break down both campaign types, show you live results from accounts we're managing right now, and help you figure out which is the best option for your store. But before we get into that, we need to understand the key differences between Performance Max and standard shopping, because these differences are what determine which you should be using. So let's start there. Standard shopping campaigns are the original way of running shopping ads on Google. They've been around for years. They're an absolute staple in the vast majority of e-commerce accounts. When someone searches for a product, your ad shows up here in the shopping results page with your product image, your title, and your reviews. The key thing about standard shopping is that it only serves in shopping placements. That's it, on the search engine results page and the products tab. Performance Max, on the other hand, is one of Google's newest campaign types released in 2021. And instead of just shopping placements, Performance Max runs across all of Google's ecosystem: YouTube, Gmail, display, discover, search, and finally shopping. So right away you can see the first major difference. Standard shopping is focused and Performance Max is everywhere. But that's just the beginning. Let me show you the other key differences that actually determine your decision between going for Performance Max or standard shopping. So let's start with control. With standard shopping, you've got lots of control. You can manually adjust bids for specific products on specific devices or specific locations. Performance Max, on the other hand, it's heavily automated and you've far less control. And instead, Google's AI makes most of the decisions. Secondly, the data requirements. Standard shopping can work really well even if you're just starting out. You don't need a lot of conversion data, but Performance Max needs data to work well. We're talking at least 30 or 50 or ideally 100 plus conversions every single month, because without that data, Performance Max is really just guessing and it's much more inclined to be really inefficient and waste your ad spend. The third thing is setup complexity. For me, standard shopping is very straightforward to set up. You just need to connect Google Merchant Center to Google Ads and create your very first shopping campaign and you're good to go. Performance Max requires all that, plus text assets, plus images, plus YouTube videos. So technically it's more work up front. Now, there was a really important update from Google back in late 2024 that made a fundamental difference to how we use Google Shopping and Google Performance Max, either in isolation or together. Because previously, if you tried to run both campaigns at the same time, Performance Max would always beat standard shopping. It would steal all your budget and your shopping campaigns would just sit there doing nothing. But Google changed this. And now the ad with the higher ad rank will get the click. And that opened up a completely new strategy that we've been using in 2025. And I'll show you exactly how that works later in the video. But first, let me show you when you should be using each campaign type individually. So when should you use standard shopping campaigns? Well, let me break down the 4 situations where standard shopping is your best option. Firstly, in new accounts. If you're just getting started with Google Ads and you don't have any conversion history yet, standard shopping is the way to go. It doesn't need a massive amount of historical data to perform well. You can launch it, start getting clicks, and begin building that conversion data from day one. Secondly, if you're spending less than $5,000 per month, I generally recommend to focus on efficiency as opposed to reach, because you can't afford to spread your budget really thin across YouTube, display, Gmail, and shopping all at once. It simply won't be successful. So standard shopping keeps your spend concentrated on the highest intent placements for people who are actively searching for products just like the ones that you're selling. Third, if you want to test your entire catalog, standard shopping makes it easy to push all your products live and see what actually sells. So this is something that we will often do. We will have a standard shopping campaign for our best sellers performing really well. And then if we want to test the entirety of the remainder of our products in our catalog, we can have a second standard shopping campaign set on low bids where we're testing to see which products have potential. So if you're looking to test your entire catalog, standard shopping is a fantastic way to do that. Number 4, if you're focusing on new customers or cold traffic, standard shopping is perfect for reaching people who have never heard of your brand before, but are searching for the types of products you sell. I've personally found that Performance Max has a tendency to cap out at a lower level because it's got quite a heavy remarketing element to it. I've actually found it much easier to scale standard shoppings 2 or 3 times more than the equivalent Performance Max campaigns. So if you're looking to use Google to really focus on cold acquisition, cold traffic, new customers, well then standard shopping can be a fantastic way of doing it. So if any of these decisions describe where you're at the moment, then my recommendation would be to start and try standard shopping campaigns. But let's talk about Performance Max now. I personally think Performance Max is best suited for these 4 specific situations. Firstly, if you have 50 to 100 conversions per month and you're looking to grow quite aggressively. Performance Max is a data hungry campaign type. It needs conversion history to understand who your customers are and where to find more of them. So without that data, it's essentially guessing. So if you're hitting that conversion volume consistently, then Performance Max has what it needs to perform. So you can see if conversion volume is very low, my recommendation is to opt for standard shopping. If it's higher, you can look at introducing Performance Max into the mix. The second point, which is very similar to the first, if you're spending over $5,000 per month, well, then you can look to introduce Performance Max as well. Once again, if you're spending less than that, you might be finding it difficult to have the conversion volume to even allow you to go to Performance Max, because really Performance Max needs a lot of daily budget, $100, $200 minimum of daily spend, because it's going to dilute it across all of those available networks like search and shopping and display and video. So you need a really high budget. So as I said, if you're under $5,000 per month in ad spend, I would generally recommend opting for standard shopping instead. Number 3, if you've got clear best-selling products, Performance Max tends to work really, really well, especially when you have proven winners that are converting consistently. Google's algorithm via Performance Max can take your proven products and scale them across the entirety of Google's ecosystem. But once again, if your catalog is still unproven or you haven't found those winners, my recommendation is go to standard shopping. And number 4, if you're looking to focus on retargeting or warm traffic. So maybe you've got a big promotion coming up and you want to use it for remarketing, well then Performance Max can be a good option. It's got built-in remarketing properties across all of Google's ecosystem. So if someone visits your site or they interact with a particular product, they can be remarketed to with that specific product on places like YouTube or the display network. It is just such a vast remarketing potential that you can't get with standard shopping. So once again, if you're in any of these situations, then Performance Max could very well be worth running. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most people think it's either or. It's shopping or Performance Max. But what if I told you there's a way to run both of them at the same time without each of them fighting for the same budget? Let me show you exactly how this works. This is what I call the bestseller expansion strategy. So here's the reality. Your shopping placements are going to be your most profitable placements. They drive the highest ROAS and maximize profit because these are people actively searching for your products. High intent, bottom of the funnel, ready to buy. So because of that, you want to maximize your coverage across the entirety of your catalog here. Get all of these products in front of high intent shoppers using standard shopping. But maybe then you hit a ceiling. You max out your placements. You get all of the profitable traffic that you can from people searching for your products. And now you want to grow. Now you want to create new demand. You want to scale your account further. That's when Performance Max comes in. Performance Max lets you expand across multiple networks. YouTube, Gmail, display, discovery, search. This is how you actually scale beyond shopping ads. But here's the mistake that most people make. They take their entire catalog, throw in a random set of ad creative, launch Performance Max, and expect it to scale to infinity. It doesn't work that way. Instead, here's what you do. You take only your top performers, your best-selling products, and you put these into Performance Max. Why? Because chances are you already have the best ad creative for these products. You've already got high quality static images. You've probably got short form content that can be used on YouTube for these proven winning products. And most importantly, these products have proven conversion data within Google Ads because Performance Max needs data to scale. So if you give it products that already have that data, your proven winners, it's much more likely to be successful. You're not wasting budget testing unproven products on expensive YouTube placements or search. You're scaling what already works. Meanwhile, standard shopping is still running your full catalog on the most profitable placements. You're maximizing profit there while Performance Max handles growth and expansion with your winners. So this is the bestseller expansion strategy. Maximum catalog coverage on your most profitable placements through standard shopping, and strategic expansion with proven products through Performance Max. Now let me show you what this looks like in a real account. Okay, so what we have here are the shopping and the Performance Max campaigns of one of our clients. So when we came on board, we would have started with the standard shopping campaign across the entirety of the catalog to see what worked. Now we have had pretty good performance across this shopping campaign. CTRs are really nice. Conversion value divided by cost, so our ROAS is where it needs to be. Our goal here is just over 3.3, so we're hitting that goal. That's perfect. And our conversion volume here, this is our highest converting shopping or Performance Max campaign by conversion volume. So we said we wanted to expand on our catalog. So this has got our full catalog. So we wanted to take our top performers, our winning products, and move them into a full build Performance Max to make most use out of them in terms of growing across all those available networks to us. So we now have 2 different Performance Max campaigns. We originally only had one, but we decided to separate it out so that we could actually have more budget control across these 2. We set a slightly higher target ROAS here because of that element of remarketing. We have obviously excluded brand as well. So what we're seeing here is this additional revenue. And in this instance here, it is 36K. And in this Performance Max here, it's 25K.
So this is net new revenue that we weren't picking up prior to this campaign. So if I take one of these campaigns and if I look at channel performance, which is one of Performance Max's new features where we can dig a little deeper into where our conversions are coming from, you can see that we have a lot of spend, 44% actually coming through our Discover network. So there's going to be quite a high element of remarketing here. There will be a little bit of cold. We have more display. We have a small bit of Gmail, and we still have this search, which in fact is actually shopping campaigns because this is search ads using product data. And we have an additional little piece of search here. So this is search ads not using product data, which is actually true search. And then we also have a lot of YouTube as well. We can go down and look at performance across those different channels. But what you can see here is that we have now expanded using our top performing products into new networks like YouTube and Discover and Search that we previously wouldn't have if we stuck with standard shopping. And that's allowed us to unlock new revenue on new channels at our target KPIs. So that's how we get standard shopping to maximize coverage across the catalog and use Performance Max then to scale our proven winners. If you're an e-commerce brand, I really recommend trying this out. We find it works really, really well, particularly if you've got hero products that you absolutely adore and that move a lot for you on Meta. You can kind of follow a similar pattern to what I've shown here today. Now I've shown you when to use standard shopping. If you're a new account, you're spending less than $5,000 per month in Google Ads. If you're looking to test across the entirety of your product catalog, or if you're looking to focus solely on cold traffic, or to the greatest extent possible, at least within Google. On the other hand, I've shown you when to use Performance Max, and it's a much better option if you have a lot of conversion data, or if you're spending over that $5,000 per month, if you're looking to scale across Google's ecosystem using your proven winners, or if you're looking for that more remarketing touch, particularly around things like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, of course. And most importantly, I've shown you when to use them together using that bestseller expansion strategy I spoke about. Running your full catalog in standard shopping for maximal profit and scaling your proven winners through Performance Max for growth.
So now you know all the differences, the good, the bad of each campaign. It's time to put it into practice. I'm going to show you how to set up a feed-only Performance Max campaign. This is one of the most powerful ways to run Performance Max for e-commerce brands, and most people have no idea how to do it properly. Let's get straight into the setup. You might have heard about feed-only Performance Max campaigns and wonder what they are, what they do, and how you go about setting them up. In this video, I'll cover all 3 questions, including one really important setting that you must turn off if you want this campaign to be successful and not burn valuable ad spend in your Google Ads account. For those new to the channel, my name is Liam. I'm the founder of Vulcan. We're a premier Google Ads agency. This is the exact setup we use for feed-only Performance Max campaigns for our client accounts. So let's dive right in. So feed-only Performance Max campaign is a custom PMax campaign with no headlines, no descriptions, no images, no videos, just products. So this forces Google to spend only on shopping and also dynamic remarketing placements. So your ads will pull directly from Google Merchant Center, and that's about it. So a couple of prerequisites: you need to have conversion tracking set up, and you need to have Google Merchant Center set up and optimized. I'm going to assume both of those are the case and jump right in to the campaign setup. Now, for some of you, you might ask, why are you running feed-only PMax campaigns instead of standard shopping? Generally speaking, the only indication to run feed-only is if you want to target warmer traffic. So if you want more of a remarketing element to the campaign, then you would opt for feed-only as opposed to standard shopping. And then the other question people might have is, why would you run a feed-only Performance Max campaign instead of a full build campaign? And the answer to that is pretty simple. If you don't want to run search or YouTube or Discover placements, well, then you don't really want to be running a full build PMax, in which case you might opt for a feed-only Performance Max campaign. So setting it up is pretty straightforward. Inside in Google Ads, we're going to go to New Campaign. We're going to click Sales as our objective, Purchase as our conversion goal. We're going to click on PMax here. We're going to select a Merchant Center account that's linked, and I will just jump right through. So all the settings are going to be the same as if you were setting up a normal Performance Max campaign here. So bidding, you can opt for maximize conversion value or target ROAS bidding. Campaign settings, you're going to select your country. And for more settings, what you might opt to do is add a brand exclusion list if you wanted to ensure that you weren't targeting any brand terms. And then here we have Google's AI asset generation. What we're going to do is skip over this entirely. We can just call this asset group feed only, and then listing group. So listing group, then we can either select all products or we can refine this to some of our products. And we just need to have business name and logos. These are going to be automatically included. Our final URL URL doesn't matter because it's going to take it to the product URL as it is in Merchant Center. We're not going to add any headlines. We're not going to add any descriptions. We're not going to add any images or any videos, any site links. We are just going to leave it as it is. Now, I'll come to the most important setting that you must toggle off, and that's your asset optimization. So you can see here under text, you've got customization and final URL expansion turned on. So customization means Google can take text from our site, our landing pages, our ads, our assets to create customized ad copy. If you turn this on, Google can start to introduce headlines and descriptions based on your landing page. And in doing so, you can start to serve on the search network. So we need to turn that off. And by virtue of that, we also turn off final URL expansion. You can turn off enhancement on videos as well, and enhancement on images. It doesn't really make any difference here. But once we are not allowing Google to introduce new assets for us. For signals search themes, I don't recommend adding search themes. That's based on my own experience. Some people might differ. I find that search themes promote more search network usage. Again, once we set this up fine, it shouldn't be an issue. But generally speaking, sometimes I'll layer in an audience signal of first party data, my customer list, but quite often I'll leave it blank. I'll just click next, set our average daily budget, and then our campaign is ready to publish. So sometimes what can happen is that you set up a Performance Max campaign, but it doesn't actually let you set up a feed only campaign. It encourages you and actually forces you to add assets. So in that instance, my recommendation is to go ahead and just add some placeholder assets and then pause that asset group in PMax and set up a new asset group from there. Quite often, it's much easier thereafter to actually just set up a new asset group. Once again, we can go in and just call this feed only. Go ahead and click all products. And I'm going to skip that. Again, I'm going to skip everything here. Click on save. And now I have my feed only, and I can just go to listing groups and I can see that all products is showing here. So that's the alternative way of getting it set up. Now, if you want to double check that your Performance Max campaign is spending on either shopping or dynamic remarketing, with time, you'll see channel performance, and you can actually begin to see that the vast majority is coming through search, which actually here is search ads using product data, which is a bit of a misnomer because it's shopping. Granted, it is on the search engine results page. And then also you can see display here a really tiny bit of Gmail and a tiny bit of YouTube as well, but the vast majority of spend, I think it's 98% of spend, is going through this PMax campaign on Google Shopping ads. So this feed only campaign is working exactly how we want it to. Now that we've gone through the theory, I want to show you some practical results. I'm going to show you a real example of how I achieved a 12.6x ROAS using feed only Performance Max campaigns. This is an actual case study from a reseller store we manage. I'll walk you through the exact setup, the strategy we used, and the specific optimizations that got us to that level of performance. This is real data, real results. Let's dive in. What if I told you that we took an ecom brand spending 45k to generating 566k in just 90 days with Google Ads? You'd probably think I'm full of shit. I'm about to show you the exact campaigns, the exact structure, and the exact strategy we use to get a 12.6x ROAS. And if you're running Google Ads and not getting the results your business deserves, you're almost certainly making one of these critical mistakes that I'm going to expose later in this video. By the end of this video, you're going to have a complete blueprint on how to replicate these results inside in your business. So grab a pen, take notes, because this is going to be a dense one. Look, I'm not here to waste your time with theory or some bullshit course that I'm trying to sell you. These are real numbers from a real client that I'm going to show you right now. So here you can see 1,000 conversions, 566k, $43 per conversion, with a cost of 45k. So July through to October. So you can see these figures are real. I'm even going to refresh the page so you can see it for yourself. I'm not making this up. So 566k, 45k cost. And this is over just 90 days. And when I go to compare it to, let's say, same time last year, what does it look like? Increased spend by 35k, increased cost per conversion by $30. You might say, okay, what's going on there? Increased purchases by 237k. Well, what did we do? We added non-brand conversions. I'm going to get into all of it right now. So the brand, obviously I can't reveal them for privacy reasons, but I can tell you they are in the tech space. They're a mixture of high ticket, low ticket products, huge catalog. They're also a reseller of multiple brands, really high average order value. You'd have seen that from the initial metrics there, about $500-$600. And if you actually look at performance compared to last year, it wasn't that we had some lucky month. This is up, 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 up every month on last year. So year over year, systematic, predictable growth. But before I show you exactly how we did this, let me tell you what was broken when we first got our hands onto the account. So this is what most people get wrong with Google Ads. I guarantee you're making at least one of these mistakes right now. Mistake number one, they think more campaigns equals better results. Simply doesn't. I see people running 15, 20, sometimes 30 different campaigns thinking they're being sophisticated. They've got separate campaigns for every single product, every single keyword, every single audience. It's chaos. You know what doesn't scale? Chaos. Mistake number two, they think Google Ads is like Facebook. They're obsessed with creative, with video ads, with trying to interrupt people while they're going about their day. That's Facebook mentality. Wrong platform, wrong strategy. Google Ads 2025, it's still predominantly about capturing existing demand on search and on shopping. Creative matters way less than structure. And mistake number three, they completely ignore Google Merchant Center. This is the big one. They spend all their time optimizing their shopping campaigns, completely ignoring the foundation that makes everything work inside in shopping. Merchant Center, it's like the engine of your car. It doesn't matter how good your driving is. If your engine's broken, you're going nowhere. So here's exactly what we did, step by step. This is what you're waiting for. First thing we did, we looked at their existing structure. Wasn't terrible, but it wasn't optimized for scale. So what do? We start from the bottom up. We started with their brand campaign. Sounds really boring, right? Wrong. Look at this. Average CPC, 23 cents. We are saving so much money. We're not paying $1, $2, $3 for a click on our branded traffic. We got our brand campaign so dialed in. We were spending just 23 cents per click. So what do we do with all that extra budget? You guessed it. New customers, non-branded search campaigns, non-branded shopping campaigns. That's what you need to do when you save money, when you run branded campaigns right. It frees up budget to go looking for new customers. And what does a business grow on? New customers. Most people are setting their branded campaigns to automated bidding and then wondering why they're paying $2 or $3 for a click on their own brand name. But here's where it gets interesting. Obviously, as I said, we had a decision to make with the remaining budget, and I wanted us to go find new customers. And most agencies would have said, let's run search campaigns for all of our product categories because we know people are searching for our products. Or let's run YouTube campaigns. Let's create more demand for our products. Let's run display campaigns. Let's try some fancy creative and see if we can get people interested in our products. We said no. Why? Because when we looked at the keyword research, the demand already existed. What do I mean by that? People were already searching for these products. We didn't need to create demand. We needed to capture it. So look at this search volume, thousands of searches per month for the exact products they sell. So what did we do? We went all in on shopping, but not the way most people do it. Now, normally with shopping campaigns, I like to consolidate everything into one campaign if I can, or at least consolidate as much as possible. Keep it simple. But in this case, the brand was different. They had a huge catalog, they had different price points, different consideration phases for each product type. A $50 accessory and a $5,000 enterprise solution don't have the same customer journey, so we segmented. We had 3 main product category campaigns plus 1 catch-all to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. But here is the key. We ran feed-only Performance Max campaigns. What the hell does that mean, you're asking? It means no ad copy, no creative, no YouTube videos in our PMax campaign. So PMax operates almost like a smart shopping of old, just product listings. So 99% of it is just shopping. But then why not just run regular shopping campaigns then? Good question. And this is where most people miss the opportunity. Performance Max lets you layer in audience signals. Shopping campaigns don't give you the same level of control. So for each of our product category campaigns, we crafted perfect audience signals. So first, customer lists, and not just any customer list. We uploaded past purchasers for each specific product category. So we weren't just telling Google, here are our customers. We were saying, here are our customers who bought our enterprise solution. Here are our customers who bought accessories. Here are customers who bought tablets. These were specific signals for our specific campaigns. The second thing we had, custom audiences based on competitor URLs. So every competitor or every other reseller that sold similar products. We added their websites to our audience signals. The next thing, search-based audiences. So for a tablet campaign, for example, we would have added terms like 12-inch tablet, high-resolution tablet, long battery life tablet, terms around search queries around our core product terms. These are the kind of queries that really high intent audiences had, and we wanted to let Google know, go after these people with our shopping campaigns. And this is what you simply have to do in the new age of AI and advertising when it comes to Google Ads. You can't just throw everything at the wall, hope it sticks. PMax is not a set and forget. Say it again, PMax is not a set and forget. You have to lean into automation, yes, but you control the inputs. We're creating a signal, we're not creating noise. That's the fundamental difference nowadays. So what was the result? An immediate uptick in performance, because Google now knew to go looking at these customers first, and these customers are likely to buy from us. So Google doesn't stop there. It will go beyond the kind of types of people you're recommending, because at the end of the day, it is just a recommendation you're making, but it speeds up learning phases dramatically. We saw it here right away, almost overnight performance shifts. Okay, next up, Merchant Center optimization. This is where the real magic happens. It's the part that most people completely ignore, and that is Google Merchant Center. So when we first got the account, Merchant Center was a disaster. We kind of guessed it would be. It's always the case with a big catalog. You have missing product variables, incorrect shipping information, no product review syncing, disapproved products everywhere. It doesn't matter what you do inside in Google Ads if Merchant Center is broken. I said it earlier, Merchant Center is the engine, you're just the driver inside in Google Ads. Broken engine, broken car, you're going nowhere. So half their products couldn't even serve because of policy violations or missing information. So we fixed it one by one. It's not pretty, but it works. First, we made sure their most important products were able to serve. This is something I say to everyone. If you have a massive catalog, you can't fix everything overnight, but you can prioritize your money makers. So start with the most important products first. The next thing, sync up your reviews. So if you're using one of Google's official partners like Trustpilot, you should be able to sync it up pretty quickly. Brands using something like Judge Me, it is a bit more of a rigmarole. Don't get me wrong, but it is worth it, always. This isn't the brand, obviously. I've just typed in a random search, but look at these two listings here. We have one from Lidl and we have one from this other brand. There are a whole host of reasons why this one is a far superior product listing, but the one I'm going to focus on right now, the reason why it is better in my eyes, are the product reviews. Over 1,000 of them. Compare that with this. Now, Lidl might get away with it. They've got a really cheap price. They're a really well-known brand, at least over here in Europe. But if you are competing directly with other resellers or other people in your space, similar size, similar brand equity, you need to get every marginal gain possible. And one way of doing that, product reviews. It looks well. Not only does it look well, it also converts well. CTR is up. You get more clicks and more impressions because Google thinks you're trustworthy. You're much more likely to get the top quality store badge. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Do it right now. Pause the video and just do it now. We did it here. We saw CTR increase across the board. Impressions, clicks, everything went up. We started trending in the right direction and we weren't even increasing ad spend. And then third, as I mentioned, we went after the top quality store badge. It's Google's way of saying your store exceeds competitors in your niche. And that's all you need to do. You need to be better than the people around you. And look at this. Google literally tells you that you can rank higher when you get this badge and it costs you nothing. Plus, it'll show up in your ads as social proof. To get the badge, you have to be exceptional across the board. So shipping times, delivery, returns, store ratings, page speed, everything. We optimized everything. And look, we are now a top quality store. Almost immediately, we saw an improvement in search impression share with no increase in costs. These are the things you need to do. Everyone complains CPCs are higher. Google is more expensive. Meta is more expensive. But they won't do the hard yards to make it cheaper for themselves. So I've no sympathy. So what happened after we implemented all of this? 90 days later, 566k in revenue from just 45k in ad spend. That's over a 12.5 ROAS. But here's what's really exciting. This is just the beginning. I still think there's far more to get from these shopping campaigns. And we haven't even layered in search campaigns yet. We haven't touched YouTube and we haven't gone near any demand gen campaigns either. We focus purely on capturing existing demand and absolutely crushed it. And now 2026 is lining up to be a record-breaking year for this brand. Now you might think, that this only works for tech companies with huge catalogs. That's not true. This works because we focused on fundamentals. Number one, campaign structure. We knew where we could get the most from our limited budget. Number two, audience signals. We fed Google impeccable data about who to target. And number three, merchant center optimization. We built the engine that made everything else work. Most people want to skip on to the advanced tactics. They want to run fancy video campaigns and complex audience layering, but they haven't mastered the basics. And as Michael Jordan says, winners don't just learn the fundamentals, they master them. Oh, Liam, but my business is different. No, it's not. The principles are the same. I don't have a huge budget, 15K per month. We didn't either. We worked with what we had and we scaled from there. I don't have a huge catalog, even better. Easier to optimize and easier to manage. My products are low ticket. I don't have an AOV of $500 or $600. Doesn't matter. The fundamental principles stay the same. I'm in a different industry. Once again, the fundamental principles don't change. Look, I've just given you a blueprint that's generated over $500,000 in revenue in 3 months. But knowing a strategy like this and implementing it, they're two different things. Most people will watch this video and get all excited, try to implement it themselves and mess it up. They'll skip steps. They'll misunderstand the audience signals. They'll ignore the merchant center optimizations. And 6 months from now, they'll be struggling with the same problems. If you want to scale your store beyond branded search and start attracting new customers with Google using high converting campaigns just like these, well then I've got something for you. My team and I are opening up a limited number of strategy calls this month. Not sales calls, strategy calls. We'll audit your current Google Ads setup, identify what's holding you back, and give you a complete roadmap to scale, specific to your business, your audience, your products, and your budget. But here's the deal. We only work with people who are as serious about results as we are. If you're spending at least $10,000 per month on ads and ready to scale, check the link below. If you're just starting out and you're not ready to invest in growth, then this isn't for you. We work with businesses that are ready to move fast and implement what we recommend. So if that's you, click the link below and book your free strategy call today. So there you have it, the complete Performance Max playbook. You now know how to set up, segment, and optimize PMax campaigns the right way. If you're a brand owner looking to scale with Google and YouTube ads, then you already know what to do. Like I mentioned, go on ahead and book a call with me via the link in the description below. We'll have a chat about your goals and see if we're a good fit. But if you're someone looking to learn more and round out your Google Ads knowledge, I've got complete courses on Google search and Google shopping campaigns on my channel. So make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more Google Ads content like this. I'll see you in the next one.